everyone. Thank you so much for, joining us again. Here we are. Let's get to the point. William, Shaunn, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go on in this open conversation, David, how are you doing?
Oh, great.
Here.
Great.
Good. Okay. Sounds good. So what's up today?
Oh, what's up today is that we have the pleasure of having Will Rodriguez and Shaunn Jones, note investors that are based in the San Diego area. Shaunn is also a realtor based in the San Diego area as well. And we've recently just been in communication through LinkedIn and engaging each other's posts. And we've had the pleasure to have them on the show and to kind of talk about their businesses and just kind of what's going on in the San Diego market and how they've been able to provide value for investors through note investing.
I love it. See, I'm really excited because we're able to bring on guests that are fellow, Californians, as they call it here. So that's what I love about Let's Get to the Point. So William and Shaunn, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to hear about, you're welcome. We're very excited to hear about, some of the good stuff that you guys have going on. I see a lot of amazing videos that you guys are putting out on LinkedIn, and looking forward to your podcast as well. And the reason why I'm, sharing with everyone about this is, like David said, LinkedIn has been a powerful platform for all of us. We are able to make connections. We're able to share engagement and discussions, and then now bring people together outside that platform. So very grateful for that. William, I know that, one of your posts, what's interesting is just to kind of, get on the topic of posting those videos to provide that educational, platform for people that are interested to understand what note investing is. Can you both take us through and just, sort of share with our viewers, what it's all about, how you both got started in this, and what's really the upcoming 2021 not trend, but where do you see that going into with note investing in real estate and being in California?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about my story without dragging too much. So for me, actually, I've been just working a 9 to 5, doing business to business sales, handling accounts for a big transportation company. I was doing some helping government contractors with bidding, proposal, line of credit, all kinds of stuff. But I always noticed that I was always in the rat race. So I knew I needed to step out of that and start my own thing. I connected with my mentor that does a lot of video about 3 years ago. He took me under his wing. He's like, hey, you need to read this book. You need to read that book. And you need to start a business. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of business, right? He's like, you're a people's guy, so do video, because that's what I'm doing. I'm gonna teach you my ways, and then just go and do some type of real estate. I didn't even know how that looked like. I thought I was just gonna sell houses or something like that. But obviously, when I met with Shaunn, he was already in the note investing, right? He was already doing that, so he filled me in on everything that he was doing. And that's when I was like, hey, we should do something together. And that was kind of like the beginning of this partnership, which hasn't even been a year now. So that's a little bit of how I got started in the note investing. Again, I was just kind of interested because this is a little bit different than the traditional, flipping a house or even multifamily investing, which is very interesting. And we're looking to do that eventually. But note investing, it's just a little bit different, right? And I was like, you know what, I could really see us on that niche and capitalizing on that niche and bringing awareness to everyone, because a lot of people don't know much about notes. So
yeah, myself, I worked in corporate America as well, but I got my real estate license, and I started kind of doing real estate part-time. And about a year and a half ago, I was like, man, this 9 to 5 thing, and I need something different. So I started talking to
the 9 to 5 is a thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're clocking out of that 9 to 5.
Yeah. And so I started talking to my broker at the time, asking him about real estate because he had been in real estate for over close to 40 years. Asking about real estate investing, and so he's beginning to talk to me about what he does, and he started talking about note investing and being the bank. As soon as he said being the bank, I was like, okay, I'm interested. What is this thing? What are you
Mhm.
talking about? So a lot of people may have some of your viewers that even know who he is. His name is Desi. He's here in San Diego, and as he began to teach me about the note space and helping me understand that, I'm like, man, this is like, why don't more people know about this? And then he explained to me that note investing has been around for generations, but only certain people were privileged to be a
Right.
part of that. It's just because until 2008, it was large banks, insurance companies,
Mhm.
high net worth families, like very high net. But when 2008 happened, the big crash, they had too much on their books, so they began to sell them off to other people that may be interested. So that's how note investing came about, and that's how I started talking about note investing. And when I met Will, and at the time, I was just telling everyone about note investing. And even though I knew people who had homes, they didn't even understand what note investing is. I'm like, who are you paying a mortgage to? To the bank, exactly. I want to be the bank.
The banks are the biggest syndicators, right?
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
They
So,
exactly.
they pretty much, do all of that to create leverage.
right.
And so
Hmm.
what I like about what you shared here is you mentioned about the 2008 crash. You
Hmm.
mentioned about, transitioning the 9 to 5, clock in, clock out. I believe that that's sort of for the past 10 years, that's where I started seeing, a lot of people I know. Those were the conversations they were talking about. So even
Mhm.
talking about, what do I do outside a W-2 or a day job and go into this real estate or the investing game? I think with note investing, it's so complex, right? It's not going to be for somebody that's just, happens to stumble upon it and decides, I'm going to go all in. It's a lot of steps, a lot of education that can
Right.
go with that. And then, being able to work with a mentor, whom you just mentioned, Desi,
Hmm.
which, I was able to see him in a panel discussion in one of the events that I attended, which I've shared with you guys. But it's just, these are key, like for everything that we go through as far as starting a business, going into the investing world. It's so important to have a mentor. It's so
Right.
important to have a really good environment that supports that.
Big time.
Real estate, living in San Diego, we know that's quite expensive,
Yeah.
cost of
Right.
living. So share with us your take on that. I mean, David, unless you have anything to ask them specifically on that, I'm curious to hear, how it's like for them to live in San Diego and kind of see the difference between living in San Diego, living in Los Angeles, and we can kind of, exchange on that because I have some insights that I'd like to share with you guys. Where I'm at, it's pretty expensive here. We were just talking about gas price.
Yeah.
And I'm
Oh,
going, I'm not trying to be petty, but man, you really notice that when you go to other areas.
mhm.
Um,
Right.
so, take it from there. I mean, David, if you have anything to add on,
Well,
you feel
well,
like,
I mean, no, yeah, I was gonna say I have some questions. I think that when people, when people talk about San Diego, and I know it's for the insights that I have from San Diego primarily come from another broker that I need to check in on, who's based down there, and he's active in the retail space. And I guess he's originally from Orange County, but I guess he went to San Diego State, and he was able to kind of provide insights as far as like the good areas of San Diego, the bad areas of San
right,
Diego. And I think that's something really important, to I guess identify too, because the thing about California is that, I mean, there is a bifurcation. There is areas that are class A, class B, class C. And just to be clear, for anyone who don't know what class A, class B, class C means, I mean, ultimately it can be the grade of the neighborhood. It could also mean the grade of the property. Class A, of course, means newer construction, higher end areas, higher income areas that normally are your metro, your downtown areas that are quickly gentrifying. Class B tends to be more traditional, working class, but stabilized areas. They tend to have more, mid-level construction as far as things that have been built in the last 30 to 40 years. A lot of 1970s, 1980s construction tends to be there. And those were a higher percentage of middle income people, I guess, with California, anything ultimately between 60 and 100,000 per household is in the middle income range. And then Class C tends to be your lower income areas. They tend to be properties with deferred maintenance. They tend to be properties with 1960s, maybe 1970s construction on back. And they tend to be areas where just socioeconomically you tend to have poorer people. So can you kind of just share, maybe give some insights to like San Diego and like what's the Class A areas, what's the Class B and the Class C, if you
Yeah.
would?
Yeah. I mean, San Diego is very big for us. We live in the North County of San Diego. I live in Oceanside. Has developed so much this past couple of years. It's almost like I don't know, they're trying to make it into La Jolla or something downtown. It's that elegant now. Like they're building
Oh, really? Okay.
hotels, a bunch of restaurants on the strip. Crime has gone down because of the law enforcement. So for me, I grew up here in Oceanside. I did move out of state about 3 years ago because I got a good job opportunity back when I used to, work for somebody. And I moved to Alabama, to Birmingham.
Oh my
And
God.
I saw the big difference, right? Not just in our culture, but as far as in
The cost.
taxes, right? Get taxed way less. Everything's property tax, everything's way less. Gas, food, you name it, right? And you have a lot more freedom over there too, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So going over there really opened my eyes to seeing how expensive California really is. And even though I came back, I realized that, for the average person, California is not really ideal to raise a family. For me, I didn't really care about the crime, didn't really care about all these bad areas because I grew up in these bad areas. So I kind of know everybody in Oceanside. It's no big deal, right? But now that I have a family, I see things way different. Why?
Mhm.
Because I want my daughter to go to a decent school, right? Just what is it? Not even a mile away from where I live. There's a middle school, there's a high school, and an elementary. There was a 16-year-old almost got kidnapped. A couple months ago, like
Yes.
before COVID. And I was like, oh wow. And I was checking, the area, and I'm like, I guess I live in a very bad area. I did not know that. Right? I'm just so used to the sirens and
Right.
helicopters. And I'm just like, this is ocean. It's like
And
I just
the funny part about that, as far as like the area where he's talking about, because you can be on one side of Oceanside and it's like he said, it's not that great of an area, but then you go on the other side, you have $1 million condos, you have ocean views, you have those types of things. Me myself, I grew up in Los Angeles County, go Rams, but so I'm not really from San Diego. My wife is, and that's why we're here. And just like Will, we moved out of state, and we lived in Georgia for almost 3 years.
That's a
So,
difference.
so the same thing.
That's,
We're both from Southern California. Me and my wife both from Southern California. Moved to Georgia. We see that the gas is cheaper. The housing price
houses.
is cheaper. The taxes are cheaper. Income tax is cheaper. It's just all of those things. And like you were saying, the middle in California, I don't even think middle class is even $100,000. I think it's more like $200,000, and to $100,000 is more middle class in California because literally, if you look at the housing prices, like who can afford this? Here in San Diego, the medium home prices, I think, last I checked, was close to 600,000. The last time we looked, I'm actually listing a townhouse in about 3 weeks, and we're listing it for $535,000, and it
Wow.
was built back in the late '80s. $535,000. I'm like,
Well,
but that's what the market value is based on the other things that are sold in the area. So I'm like, wow. And this is a townhouse, no yard, no nothing. You share walls with someone else, you know, the whole thing. So
Well, you mentioned, La Jolla in comparison. I mean, that area, whew, I love that area. They have a really good, I forgot the name because it's been 10 years plus ago.
Right.
Todd has a really good friend who actually lives there. So when we saw that place 10 years plus ago, we were just like, wow, beautiful area. And then we looked at, the price of the homes in general. We were just taken back because we were like, who lives in this area? Like you're thinking, who lives in this area? So what David was saying is class A, B, and C.
Yeah.
You're thinking, well, you have surgeons, doctors, people that have planted their roots, right? Maybe off, back when they graduated and decided, hey, I'm gonna plant a business here in San Diego. Right. So when you're looking at La Jolla in comparison to Oceanside, which is now probably going through that phase of, gentrification, or maybe, again, a lot of investors are coming in and seeing the potential because it is San Diego. It has a zip code of San Diego. So anybody that hears the word San Diego, they're like, oh, I love it there. It's beautiful there. So, and then, just like when people say, oh, you guys are in LA, the first thing they think about is Hollywood and, celebrities and, Beverly Hills. So it's interesting because when we're sharing this conversation and you guys live on that side, on my end, it's interesting because Todd, who I keep mentioning, he's actually my business partner and my husband, he had a chance to go to Atlanta, Georgia. No change on income whatsoever. We had an opportunity to go and explore that idea. So when you mentioned that, I was like, I so agree because you can find a house there for $350,000.
Yeah.
And it's like 3,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So his actual brother ended up moving there from South Carolina. So, it's interesting because when you hear how much somebody else paid for their house, and then you're thinking about how much you paid for yours, you're just going, okay, what am I really doing here?
Yeah.
Right? You're like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? So it's kind of like, you tend to kind of look at other states and say, like, what's really going on there? Like, how is it, so.
Yeah, how they pay low taxes and they're able to get a lot of things done. Usually have better school systems, like a example, right? Texas. Compared to California. I mean, you look at their tax bracket, you look at their business tax, you look at, their roads, you look at their schools, you look at their crime. I mean, compare that to Texas to California. Wow, I don't know why. I get why people are leaving by the thousands.
The psychology of it.
Yeah, you see a lot of businesses actually are, beginning to navigate to Texas, places like Tennessee, different places. Not that they can't afford to stay here, because they're making money, but they're like, it doesn't make any sense business wise at this point. Our taxes are increasing, and through our society now, it's well, they need to pay more. Why? It's like
why?
Why do we? Why?
Tell us why. Prop 15.
Where other states are doing just fine, and they're not charging their businesses these high taxes. So why is it that they can still operate, but we're not operating efficiently?
Well, I think that's a that's a nuanced question. One, we have the largest population. And I think that's so next to Texas. And then two, you also have to see that, I guess the difference between a lot of traditionally red states where you have lower taxes is that some of the social programs tend to be less. California's cut out a lot of theirs, but historically, blue states tend to have more social programs and supports than red states do. So, like, case in point, I recently moved from Illinois and I live next door to Indiana. Indiana's another case of where you have lower tax liability. A lot of Chicagoans move to Northwest Indiana because the same conversations exist, where the return on your investment as far as buying a house, gas, pretty much everything is cheaper. But there's also certain issues that are not addressed in Northwest Indiana. Case in point, snow. So Northwest, you're off of Lake Michigan. During winter, you get a ton of snow. no roads are shoveled. So, and
Yeah.
that's not hyperbolic. I mean, I worked for a commuter rail company in Chicago for 12 years, and my coworkers who would commute and they'd have to be there at 6 in the morning, commute into downtown Chicago or almost near downtown Chicago, would have to leave home an hour earlier than I had to be at work. So I
Mhm.
lived in the city proper, so I could be at work within 15 minutes. They'd have to leave out of their house at 5 o'clock in the morning to ensure that they were going to be there on time. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's just like certain things that come into place where you have to kind of, there's certain things that you're giving up. And I think that for the people who are leaving California, I think those are the people who are going to leave California, the people who don't have roots here. Um, if you don't have family here financially, it doesn't make as much sense to stay. I mean, it doesn't make sense to stay. But if you have roots here, if you have family here, you have business here, then yeah, I mean,
You do
it
have
makes
family, it doesn't make
sense.
sense you stay.
No, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
if you have family, it can make. I mean, depending on what it
It's
is. I mean, if it's
it's
just your
harder.
nuclear,
Right.
if you have a nuclear family and it's just you, your significant other, your children, then of course you can pick up and move because you don't have familial support. But if you have familial support, your siblings are here, your parents are here, then it makes this a little bit more difficult to pick up and make that transition.
Oh yeah, I have. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands, of family members in Oceanside alone. I mean, we multiply like bunnies.
I know
You
where to
know,
knock. Give me the addresses. I'll be knocking.
I know for real. And yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the nail, David. If you have strong roots here, it's harder to leave. And if I could compare the California, again, we'll dive into politics because ties along with what we're talking about. California governor, New York governor. California governor says nobody's gonna leave because we have great weather.
That's
Like,
right.
why don't you want to be here? And therefore he carries himself like he doesn't care if businesses leave. The New York governor, even though they do similar policies, especially with the shutdown, he understands at least the importance of business being in New York.
Of course,
Right? He wants to bring them back.
of course.
And that's one thing that we see of a big difference from California and New York,
New,
taking
New,
different positions on that.
New York is a bit of extreme. New York is going through economically a harder time than California is. So I think that's a hard comparison. I mean, if you're a real estate agent in New York right now, compared to California, you're looking for a 9 to 5 job. I mean, especially in commercial real estate right now.
Right.
I think they said transactions, according to BizNow Cranes recently, they said transactions are down half. And so you're looking for a 9 to 5 right now. I mean, so I think it's a different environment. So to make those, of
Yeah,
course,
I mean,
New York is kind of reversing its course and trying to be more business friendly because it's ultimately at the core of its survival, and it has a population. Whereas it's not as large as California, but per capita is denser than California, than most
exactly.
places in California. So yeah, it's essential to have businesses there so the residents that are there
You
can
have a
have
job.
a place to work.
And I
Um,
know this candidate AOC a couple of years ago pissed off Amazon, right? You remember that?
yeah, I
And
think
there's that battle even going within
well,
New
well,
York
well,
politicians.
so here, I mean, the thing is with, kind of mentioning ALC, I don't, with, a situation like Visa with Amazon, and I think that we should all be cognizant of the amount of power that Amazon has and influence in our own lives. I mean, it's something that, you know, ultimately, especially their value that they've increased, during the shutdown. I mean, they've become ultimately essential business because a lot of people are not going out of their houses. So I think that when you're making business deals, and I've seen it especially coming from Chicago, I've seen a lot of politicians make bad deals with businesses just so they can necessarily get that business there, and they don't necessarily project or look at the full value proposition of that business being placed in the city. I think so. I think that's something that you have to be cognizant of. Case in point, in Chicago, we sold our rights for the parking meters for 100 years to about $1.5 billion, about 10 years ago. And I think a friend of mine and I kind of just underwrote that deal, and I said that they made their money back. It just factoring in like the central business district in Chicago, they made their money back within the decade
Mhm.
just because of the the parking revenue, the tickets they have the city enforcing. If people are not paying for the meters, so they're not even really doing the work as much as far as the meter enforcing. So essentially, it was a deal where the city missed out on billions of dollars in revenue by essentially undercutting themselves, and the deal that they cut with the second the parking contractor that essentially paid the city for it. And I think that when you're a city and you're a municipality as large as a place like New York, or wherever especially a large municipality in California, I think that you have to be more cognizant of the value proposition that a larger business is offering. So the deal on Amazon, I think they were trying to move to Queens, but if they're asking for too much, then you get ultimately end up in a deal that's worth more. Um, Case in point, another bad business deal was, I think, when, and not to get too deep off in the wheels with politics, but 15 years ago when the Trump actually owned his apartment portfolio in New York, he
Mhm.
sold it off to a Jewish family he sold it off to a family that's still based there for about 700 million. By some estimates, he undercut himself, or sold it at a $300 million discount.
Mhm.
So for his portfolio, for his family's portfolio, his father's portfolio in Queens. So the point is, I think that when you're a larger major metropolitan city, I think you need to be very cognizant and just understanding of what the value of what it is you're selling, whether it's land rights, whether it's air rights, whether it's, whatever it may be, to these developers, because that the reality of it is that you may be undercutting yourself. If you live somewhere, if you live in the South, if you live in a place where you're starving for business, and you have, you have a people that are who need $15 an hour jobs, or it's nothing, then of course that makes a whole lot of sense. We had the case in point recently where we said where a suburban mayor in Chicago said no to Amazon, mayor, I believe in LaGrange, because they wanted to build a facility and essentially pay people $15 an hour. And he's like, well, we have enough $15 an hour jobs in, LaGrange, or in that Chicago suburban city. We don't, that's not enough of a value proposition for us. And then also it was going to add more traffic to what's considered the I-55 corridor, which is like a, main artery into downtown Chicago and, out of the state. So that for you, I think that when you are looking at these, when we're looking, from the outside, when politicians decline, large business owners deals, we have to understand the mechanics of going to, or the value proposition of what they're offering. If they're asking for too high of a tax cut, if they're, and the deal is accepted, or concessions are made and the deal is accepted, that ends up getting the tax liability or the tax delta that's needed from the operating budget, ultimately ends up getting pushed on the taxpayers. So if you get tied up in a deal with Amazon or whoever, the manufacturer may be, and you offer them tax incentives or tax breaks for 10 years, who's going to pay for that delta, when there's pension liabilities that become due? It's really going to be the citizens of that state, because we're having that same thing happen in Chicago right now, where we did not project enough income for the firefighters and police officers pension, and as a result thereof, that liability is being passed on to the citizens. What ends up happening from there, citizens leave for more tax-friendly states. So, as a politician, it may come off as seeming aloof to some people, or just a bad business decision by not letting an Amazon in. Because from face value, you know what, the community may need jobs, but it's at what cost? I mean, it's case in point. Like if you're looking at a deal, we just use a perfect example. And I don't know if Jona, you can kind of put into it. If someone offers you to be a part of a syndication deal, but they want you to, but what they're offering, the amount of power or return on investment they're asking for, the amount of equity you're putting up is not congruent, you're going to walk away from that deal. And somebody else may say, oh, and you may share that insight with somebody else, and they say, oh, I would have never walked away from that deal, even if they weren't giving you enough incentive, which you felt personally to be vested in that deal. So I
Right.
think that's just something that has to be factored into place when you're having, when you're looking at these opportunities,
Yeah.
is that, from a politician standpoint, if your goal is you have to be able to it's not necessarily look at the deal at what its value is today, but look at the deal, how it's going to affect your
Yeah.
municipality in 10 years.
Yeah, I definitely understand. You touch on a lot of good points when it comes down to tax incentives and Amazon getting too big, which is true. Amazon's competing. That's why I don't like how a lot of politicians now are carrying themselves and shutting down a lot of small businesses, making it hard for them. But you could go to Home Depot, you go, Amazon, you could order an Amazon. You go to these big retail companies, but the small and pop shops are hurting, right? I don't like that they're doing that. Another thing when it comes down to tax incentives and opportunities, like in New York, right? I think if I'm I could be wrong, in the beginning, Amazon was going to start $50,000, 50,000 jobs just in the area, and wasn't eventually going to increase. So now you talked about looking at the pros and the cons. I personally, if I was in that place, I would say, you know what? I'm gonna give you tax incentives. You're gonna get some write-offs anyways because businesses get creative in how to write off stuff. Yeah, I mean, 50,000 people having jobs, getting paid more than minimum wage. That's kind of good to
But
me.
And to David's point as well, uh, I get it. We don't know all the back end things that are happening. We don't know the full picture. But as someone that's sitting there in front of a someone selling their home because they're moving out of state and they've lost their small business, which I've been faced with that because of the policies that have been put in place. But when you're saying that, hey, we care about businesses, we care about the individuals, but you have small businesses that are shutting down during this time,
But
and
hundreds.
they're now having to sell their homes. Have and for me, I'm like, oh, and I'm not looking at it like, oh, that's great. I'm a realtor. I have an opportunity to sell those homes. I'm also looking at it from a human
collateral
perspective,
damage.
and like, man, this is not good. It's not cool because you have people that are actually struggling that depend on that, and that's what I was saying. That middle class here in California, you'd be surprised what's actually middle class.
Yeah.
If you're making 100 grand a year in San Diego or in California in general, yeah, you're not really middle class.
Mhm.
you know. So it's a trickle down effect.
Mhm.
It's a trickle down effect, and us all being in real estate, we're gonna start seeing more of it next year.
Right.
Yeah.
I already envision we're gonna see
Well,
more things hitting the market, especially on our side in the note space, with all these people that haven't been able to pay their mortgage. Now they open it up for the banks. Now, hey, now give me my money. They haven't been paying for 5, 6, 7 months. People don't have that money. So what do you think is going to happen with those notes? What do you think is going to happen
well,
with those homes?
Well,
Yeah.
I think unlike the last economic downturn, and I think I spoke to this before, is that during the last economic downturn, you had a lot of people. The banks were not giving people money giving people money to buy properties, right? Or not, or it was requiring a significant amount of leverage. I think compared to put it in perspective, I think in California, for commercial properties, people are used to paying anywhere from 30 to 50% down payment for a commercial property. In Chicago, during this same time 10 years ago, that was the normal, but the reality of it is that people didn't have that same level of liquidity. The difference is now is that you can't walk down the street without someone offering you a loan. And and I think that's the key difference. And that's going to really be what's going to be the difference between the financial bloodbath that many people expect next year in real estate. I think, and I've said it once, I'll say it again. I think that it's highly, being over projected that that's going to occur. Especially, unless you're in retail, unless you're in hotel, but like single family and multifamily, I think will still be in stronger places than, a lot of people project just based upon that. I think the issue is that as long as there's demand for housing in the markets that you're in, I think that the amount of distressed inventory is not going to occur. And instead, as long as there's, banks are still providing, loans for these properties, I don't think the level of distressed inventory is going to occur as a lot of people project it to. And I think that's something that we really have to just have measured expectations. And when we are as service providers are going, to looking for opportunities, is that it's not going to be as bad as it was 10 years ago. I mean, it's just because because you can't go any, you can't have any communication with someone online. You can't be on LinkedIn, for example. Like every day or every other day, I have a loan officer saying, "Do you need debt? Do you, And 10 years ago, that didn't exist. I mean, it is that conversation. People weren't that
Money, money,
aggressive.
money is cheap right now.
Yeah,
Money is
or
going to
debt
be,
is cheap. Yeah.
But
no,
how
you
long can
guys,
it be that cheap?
what's that?
How long can we expect it to be that cheap? At some point, the Federal Reserve and the banks are going to have to say, you know what, we can't afford to keep giving 2%, 3% loans. We can't afford it. At one
Gotcha.
point in this
Guys,
country,
you
we
guys
did
brought
pay
so many
12%.
like crazy good points. I just want to touch on a few, Shaunn.
Okay.
On that note, when you said, that where the note investing comes in, of course, that's not my forte. What David was talking about as far as, the incentives of companies moving back to, the business side of things. And Amazon, William, you mentioned. So just, as a source, it says here, after 2 straight years of paying zero in the US federal income tax, Amazon was on the hook for $162 million bill in 2019. The company said in the SEC filing on Thursday. Of course, 162 million is still just a fraction of the 13.9 billion in
Billion.
tax income Amazon reported for 2019, roughly about 1.2%.
I'd be happy to pay that.
That's crazy.
Like,
Right? Like, I mean, we're talking about sharks in
I'll
this
pay that
ocean.
all day long.
yeah,
Like, I
lot of
mean,
people,
that's paying a tip at a restaurant.
right? And a lot of people get it with like, man, they have to pay their fair share. They have to pay their fair share. But then, like, I know I listen to a lot of Dave Ramsey. He's always like, don't spend money like you're in Congress. I don't really get that. I'm like, what does he
yeah,
mean? Then I look at how federal and the state government pay, like spends, and I'm like, they really
it's
paid
zero.
175 million to remodel their office. Like,
Yeah.
is that a thing?
Yeah.
Right? So you're telling businesses to pay more in order to do what? Right? So I'm a big because I believe a lot of Mexican Americans, like myself, Latinos, are capitalists at heart, but we vote the other way for whatever reason, right? The reason why is because we come here, we want to work, we want to build something, we want to take care of our families. We don't want handouts. We
It's
just want to
apology.
get out of my business
Mhm.
and just let me be, let me build, right? And I think society now says, give me more programs, right? Because I'm not privileged, right? I'm Latino, Black, and we don't feel like we're not privileged. Like we just like no, like we actually feel
It's
like we're privileged.
There's opportunity.
well, you also live. Like I said, this also depends on where you live too, and I think that's something that also when a lot of people who kind of kept that kind of mindset, it depends on where they live. I mean, you look at like even for California, you look at a lot of people who are red in like a lot of red places in California, and traditionally they tend to be the most wealthy places. I mean, you look at like what is it? I live near Long Beach, and you
Right.
go to the marina, the harbor in Long Beach. It's the highest price per unit, price per square foot, zip code in Long Beach, 90803. It's called Balboa Harbor. I went there a few months ago for my birthday, and you look. Those are the places with the money. It's not the place, in Southern California. There is Newport Beach. It's the higher end areas that have that mindset. And the thing is, when you are in a place where there's opportunity, where there's growth, that's a different conversation. it's for those who need the social programs traditionally are not in those markets. And I think that's something that has to be factored in. I think that the issue with governmental weights is definitely a key problem that needs to be addressed.
Right.
There shouldn't, I mean, that's something that there should definitely be a microscope on to make sure that all the money that's given to, politicians is, going through with a
Other kind
fine tooth comb. So yeah, I
yeah,
definitely agree with that. But at the same time, the difference between what you have going, especially in California, and it's jarring, is that you have the amount of have-nots in California. I've never, living in Chicago the majority of my life, I have never seen just like the clear demarcation between the have and the have-nots. The have-nots literally live outside. It's kind of a place where you can't go anywhere without it being present. I mean, you can't go, like whether you're going through in where I live, there's a catch basin where I go ride my bike, and there are people that live there. You go to a fast food restaurant and you see people outside, there. You go to downtown areas, Long Beach. Matter of fact, where my office is downtown Long Beach. There's homeless encampment right out front where there are people just hanging out. And I think that's something that really speaks to the issues that California have not come to address with. I think it's really hard to say, well, you know what, we don't need more money for social programs. But at the same time, there is a large population in California that's not being, addressed or being treated as an invisible. And that's it's the homeless population.
And,
And
and
yeah,
you're 100% correct. But to that, what I'm saying is these politicians we will have the pleasure of talking to a local politician here. We're not going to say his name because we didn't get his permission to say his name. But he talks about the money that's been given to his particular district,
city.
that his city, that the politicians that are in control of it are not using. They're sitting on this money. They're doing other things that they shouldn't be doing. And we can talk
He
about
told me,
we can talk about a whole
just an example.
There's a lot of things happening in the background that these cities, these states, and these counties have money for it, that has already been given. So now they're talking about taxing the businesses more. They're raising if you make $400,000 a year or more, you need to pay more taxes. Where we already have the money, we're just not using it correctly. So we need to have checks and balances for these people, right? Because that's affecting everything. That's affecting business. That's affecting real estate. That's affecting the homeless population. That's affecting these low-income communities. So it's not that the money is not there. They just choose to mismanage it.
And one thing that he told me is like, hey, well, like, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is a small city, right? He's like, we're getting about it was a big amount. Like, I think it was like 20 million in funding from the state just to go knock on doors to senior citizens to help fix anything that's wrong in their house. Like, you talking about the roof, anything, right? And he's like, I was like, so what's happening there? How's the outreach going? He's like, everyone's lazy in the city. Like, everyone that I work with, like, I need to actually push them to do something because everyone just goes and collects a check. And he's like, everyone's just not motivated to go above and beyond. The funds that we're getting, we're sending them back because we're not using them.
And the reason that they're not motivated, because to your point, it's not affecting them. They can't understand. They can't connect. They can't understand what that community that needs that money, how they're being impacted. They're thinking about, okay, I got my check, I'm gonna go home. And that's what a lot of our politicians are doing. Right now.
And that's where I love entrepreneurs that get into politics. I never want to be a pastor. I never want to be a politician, but let's see what the Lord calls me to do. But what I'm saying is that a lot of people
voting for you, William. I'm voting for you.
What a lot of people don't have is that hunger, the desire. Like me and Shaunn,
I was gonna say you touch on that.
Yeah, we talk about like privilege and business getting like incentives and stuff like that. I mean, we had that in Mexico without the corruption. Mexico will be more on top of, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
More wealthy than us, to be honest. But what I'm saying is that the mission that Shaunn and I have is to reach back to our communities and teach them everything that we've been learning.
Yeah.
We in schools, they don't teach
They
business.
do not teach.
They don't teach like tax incentives. They don't teach like how to like, start a business, nothing like that.
Mhm.
So for us, we want to reach back to our communities, and we're trying to make an effort now. But I know as we get more influence, we're going to be able to impact more communities.
Mhm.
Now we could go back to them and say, hey, you know what? Like I know a lot of these minorities, they don't have a father figure because most of them are arrested or doing
Mhm.
other stuff, right?
Mhm.
And we want to fill in that gap and
Mhm.
teach them what is not being taught in their homes. Because at the end of the day, if you compare like blacks, Latinos, and then white people, they have a tendency to like first be there and second teach them financial literacy, which we don't have a lot of that.
Mhm.
And I think there's a big problem there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, financial literacy isn't taught in at or the grade school level, and a lot of times not taught at college.
And it should be.
Um,
Well, it's
yeah,
not.
And that's a failure. That's a failure. And I don't want to keep bashing politicians because they have a tough job. But you know what? That's where people like us come into play. So we
politician. No, I was gonna say politicians had a tough job. They wouldn't try to stay in office. The only time you see a politician trying to leave office, in many cases, is if they're in an embattled position. There's nothing. I mean, politicians are one of the most challenging people that for me to have sympathy for as human beings, and especially coming from Chicago.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
so yeah,
What I
no,
mean
they
by tough, everyone's
yes.
looking at them and everyone's everything that they do. Oh, you did this wrong. You did this wrong. But that's why our biggest thing is to get around people like that so we can understand, so we can talk to them, so we
Empathy,
you
the
know
empathy.
maybe we
and and
can
and
different.
to you guys' point earlier about the ALC comment, I
Mhm.
think that where you guys may necessarily disagree with her politics, you cannot disagree with the fact that her and other members of the squad are really counting for governmental accountability, and they're even doing it amongst their own party. And I think that's something that's lacking. And I think that especially just with a lot of politics right now is just kind of following the party line, and especially in the current environment you have a lot of people who are in the place where just following party line even if things are not necessarily correct. And
Exactly.
when you don't, and when you dissent, whether side of the fence you're in, because it's really interesting because now you have some dissent in the red. But when you dissent from your party politics, you're seen in many cases, um you know especially if you're the smaller group, as a bit of a traitor, or that you're kind of I guess making things seeing making us look divided in the public light. And the reality of it is there needs to be a part of every political group as one that holds the other part accountable for their actions and their misdeeds. And I think that's something that's really going to be the only way you have a change in politics. And one,
Mhm.
I almost say, is that once you get past a certain time period that you've been involved in politics, and especially if you're not moving the needle, I don't care if you're a state rep, I don't care if you're an alderman, I don't, senator, you need to leave. And I think the problem is that in many cases, whatever race you are, that the older people tend to vote at higher levels. I mean, than younger people, and unfortunately, they tend to vote for what's familiar to them, whether or not that person is doing the best job and creating the best support for them. You will always see that, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. But they're also the most susceptible to disinformation, so they also tend to be the ones that share the most false news, so to speak, than their younger peers who tend to fact check information a little bit more. So I think that's really a part of the challenge, is one, to get younger people to vote, not necessarily just on presidential elections, but to get to vote, on the local elections, which tend to mean more, because a lot
Yep.
of people get all tied up in, oh, this presidential candidate is going to change this. And it's really state that whoever your governor is, whoever your state reps are, that's who's going to influence your life. It's not really, in many cases. So those are the people that you really need to be voting for, and those are the people or voting against, and those are the people that you need to hold accountable. Because if not, yeah, politicians
the
continue to do what
original
they're doing.
intent, right?
Where I live, it's where I live, just to kind of touch on that, there's not many minorities in my area. It's quite bougie here.
The name Calabasas is bougie enough.
Calabasas, oh
I
my
mean,
gosh. Like,
sorry,
oh my gosh, no,
sorry.
don't want to, give that off by, but to that point, where I'm at, I understand what what Shaunn was saying about the real estate side, with everybody kind of going through that phase where, yeah, it could be an advantage as an investor, but you're still having to look for the new money, new income, new families moving in. And that's really a big question for me, like specifically Los Angeles. But with Los Angeles, when you subdivide those areas, there's new money and there's old money. Beverly Hills, you've got Hollywood, you've got Studio City, lots of millionaires, multimillionaires, surgeons, doctors. And then you start going to like Brentwood area, SoCal area. Everybody's kind of, your typical middle class working people. But like to your note, Shaunn, you're making 100K a year. That's not really middle class working income. You're pretty much close to poverty.
Right.
Here.
Yeah.
No offense to those that are making that. That's great. But that's not enough to say I'm good.
Right.
Not in this state.
Right.
I think it depends on lifestyle too. I mean, if you're supporting the family, I think of course not. But I mean, if you're single, it may be. I think that's really what.
I haven't changed my lifestyle. I
Well,
still count coins. Like I tell my kids, I'm like, you got $5. We better go to the dollar store if there's one. There's one, right?
There's a dollar store in Calabasas. 99-cent store.
You know what I'm saying, right? Like I like the psychology of it is it's up to you to change that lifestyle.
Exactly.
And for me, I'm like, whether I'm making more than 100K a year, I don't plan to change my lifestyle. I'm good where I'm at. And to know that you have the money, the extra money, I think it's what you guys are saying is teaching that financial literacy,
exactly,
the business acumen, and then passing it down because your kids do make you accountable. And I can speak this from experience because I've got a 21-year-old, right? So my youngest is 8. So it's one of those things where you're held accountable even though you don't want to be. In that sense, right? It's a silent. So I think the culture, the psychology, the real estate, politics, they are now the actual driving force to why the younger people are starting to listen. They're starting to pay attention. And I know that with my 18-year-old, he really tuned in and he had his first vote, and that experience I think will be an impactful one. And to David's note, voting locally. Your communities. I really believe that that's the key, but unfortunately my side of things, I don't think there's many minorities that went into the local let's just say seats.
No.
I won't name names, but I actually know some of those people that we were embedded in the community, and I was telling my husband, I said, oh my gosh, I was just like, no.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that unfortunately in my side, everyone that gets into office from the local level to the state level, people that look like me and they have a similar last name as me vote everything that I stand against. So it's like, I have a familiar face there, but you're voting for more taxes and to strip away more of my gun rights. It's like, well, I'm not really cool with that.
Well, I think that the reality of it is you have to be in tune where you live at and know what the politics are there, and ultimately you have to decide, if you want to change, then you may end up having to, bite your tongue and vote against it. I mean, run, not vote. run against that person, because the vote, yeah, I mean, like if the majority of the people that live around you, or the plurality of them live around you, have a different view of views mindset, then yeah, if you got to either run, run for and promote your own views, or move somewhere else. I mean, I think that's really what it comes down to, and I think for a lot of people in California, that there's this taste in their mouth that in their mindset, California is becoming a lot more liberal, or a lot more tax state, and the reality of it is they don't know how to reconcile that, those feelings, without necessarily moving somewhere else. I mean, you want the benefit of being where you're at, but at the same time, your politics may not be in alignment with the people
Right.
around you,
Yeah.
and you got to figure out like which one's more important to you. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's really what it comes down to,
It
because I
started.
don't think it's going to change.
Yeah, it started affecting me recently because my daughters was gonna go to kindergarten, and we're in a place right now that they're passing a lot of laws where they could teach sex
Yeah,
at
certain
5 years
things,
old,
yeah.
6 years old,
Yes,
depending on the county and the city, right? That's why it's
sex
important to
education.
go locally.
Yes, yes.
And they were even teaching about like LGBT, like anal sex and all that. And I'm like, well, I'm not cool with that. That should be
No.
more of us and having that
Well,
control, not the government, right? And that's for me, like we really started well, we started homeschooling, first of all. Second of all, we're actually looking at moving out of state for that particular reason.
yeah,
We want my
yeah,
wife and I to have the flexibility of just, you know what, if we don't want to homeschool no more because my wife is having a tough time, to just, take her to school and
yeah.
not worry about those things. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I mean, that's the great thing about America. That's your choice to move, where you feel to move, to be around people that you feel have the same similar values as you.
Yeah.
So, like, case in point, like where we live so I live in Cerritos. So, part of the reason why, I don't know if I'm assuming I live with my in-laws, but they were very intentional about moving here is because they wanted to be in a heavily South Asian community, because they're South Asian.
Mhm.
So, and now when we're looking to move into places now, my wife is really being intentional about us staying in LA County versus Orange. And the reason, because my daughter's African American, and unfortunately, a lot of Orange doesn't have a large African American. California in general doesn't have a large African American community population, but Orange even has less of an African American population. And her concern is that as she gets older and goes to school, she wants to make sure that she sees people to a certain, as much as possible that look like her. And I'm just looking at it from a price per square foot. I'm like, oh, well, Orange is cheaper, but her mindset is like, what does it
I may
benefit
need to
us?
leave my area after hearing this.
What does it benefit being in a cheaper area? So like to put it in perspective, like we were, our argument has been over like either Long Beach or Buena Park, and I'm looking like, well, Buena Park is cheaper. She's like, there are no African American people in Buena Park. You want your daughter to go to school with children that look like at least a little of them that look like her. So
Yeah.
even though Long Beach is the more expensive option, she's been really just more intentional about looking for, houses in Long Beach. So, so that's what you just have
I
to
really didn't
figure
think
in.
through this.
Well,
I
then
really did not
I
think.
grew up in
Huh?
yeah,
Sorry, sorry, Shaunn.
I grew up in the IE. There's a very large mixed environment, so that may be where you're looking at.
She's not going further inland.
Right.
She said that was a no. IE would be, I mean, from a price perspective, IE is great because it's a lot cheaper. But the issues with the IE is that it gets really hot.
It does. It gets a little hot.
It gets really hot. I mean, I was in, what was it, a couple weeks ago, went to San Jacinto and going through Riverside at that point, and this was still October, and it was still like 90 some odd degrees.
Well, you talking
So
about that's more of like the desert kind. You start
Might
to
as
get
well
in
be
the
in
desert
Arizona
area.
then, huh?
I'm talking about more like go towards like Diamond Bar, West Covina,
okay,
Hills, like that kind of area. Because yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, I'll keep
But
that in
hey,
mind.
yeah, over there, yeah, it's hot.
You
Yeah, my
definitely have
brother-in-law
to find
lives
a good school district when you're
Yeah,
raising,
right,
young kids.
for
And,
that
sure.
as well.
and to that note, I'm just listening because I should have thought through before I moved. Like now, just thinking about it, because we don't see, because we're a very mixed family. So, we have to deal with just sort of, talking about, what it's like to look different. And when somebody asks you like, well, you're from Canada, but it's actually, we're Americans, Canadians, like we're both citizens, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The roots were planted here. But to that point,
Your Can-Ams.
yes, the Can-Ams, that's right. But to your point, William, about choosing to leave out of state, considering, what the school district, offers families like yourself, because you have young kids. So I can definitely relate. And to David's note, that's the beautiful thing about America, is that we're so privileged with options and choices. And honestly, to what I was trying to say is my experience even raising my kids on this side is completely different from where we came from, because we knew everybody. We don't have family here. So to that point, when you're raising and you're looking at school districts and what the topics are, they also had a very similar voting with what happened with what you just said. They had to vote because of the type of literature being allowed to be brought into their actual school program. So some of the literature have things such as, violence, sexual suggestions, things like that. So being more on the liberal side, the majority voted they're okay with that. So when you look at people that maybe are a little bit more conservative, that's where this politics and all of that kind of gets mixed in. Now, on the business side, I would say to be in business, or to be a business person and to run for politics, you have to have thick skin to do that.
Oh, big time.
So, right. So even looking at Trump, I'm like, I don't know how he does it.
Yeah.
But going back, way back to this early conversation, I actually meant to share about that, the whole Amazon, scenario. You can just imagine they're a big shark in this big ocean. So for me to look at that in a more, general analogy is, no matter what, when you're dealing with business opportunities and partnerships, there's always that one person or that one scenario where they're figuring out how it's going to benefit them back, right? It's sort of the leverage in effect, right? They create leverage. So, politicians running for government, things like that, there's always that sort of reciprocation. So businesses like Amazon, they're making deals happen, not in front of us, but somewhere else. So we should all know that. That's no secret. And I deal with a lot of, let's just put it this way, conversations with high net worth individuals, and they do things that you and I would not have normally thought of, whether we went to college or not.
Mhm.
Okay, so those are the things that we would learn because they are doing it. They've done it. And it's not because it's illegal. It's not because you're doing something stupid. It's more like the strategies of the rich. So to that note of living in California and seeing these different areas, I would say new money, old money. The old money, they're retiring, right? So they have a lot to shed out. They've got to invest that. And now you're looking at new money, people getting married, they're coming from the tech sector. Actually, we have a lot of tech industries leaving the state of California. So, right? So new money maybe would be coming from the cannabis industry, new money coming from being a celebrity or TikTok celebrity, right? You know what I'm talking about. There's one person, she's a female, and she had this whole article. She literally turned into a millionaire because of her TikTok. Wow. And she lives here. Wow. So that just shows you what the new money would look like, right? Yeah, we're not midway, right? We're still making our way in that new money per se, right? Okay. So, and to going back to William and Shaunn's note investing, my question to you, and take this opportunity to spotlight that, is where do you both see the note investing going into this new money, new decade, or even the next 2-3 years post-COVID, and understanding the psychology around that? We talked about politics. We talked about our, school district per se, which area you're going to raise your kids, jobs, Amazon, I don't think Amazon would ever come to Los Angeles, not in that regard. I think they'd come from a retail. So yes, I see the job opportunities coming from, the industrial and supply chain management as we go into this e-commerce in the next decade. But where does that take, being a note investor, going into the real estate side of that as well? Because I would think you're right, there's going to be a lot of distress. There's going to be a lot of people needing that solution somehow, right? Somebody like you coming in and saying, we want to talk to you about this. Here are some options, and maybe take us through that. Like what would it look like when you're talking to a potential problem, and where you guys see note investing in the next year or so post COVID?
Well, right now we're already seeing a lot of these larger funds and things like that um, preparing for that. We've seen a couple of things where a larger, smaller banks, smaller funds that have combined money because that way they can pick up more. For the regular consumer, it's just going to be the fact of who's going to pick up their mortgage. In our business and in Desi's business, what he's taught us is our number one thing is to try to help people get back on track. We want to use this opportunity to help people that are in that bad situation. Yeah, we're buying their note. Yes, we are going to become their bank. Yes, we are going to make a profit because we are not a nonprofit business. We're in a profit business, but our thing is not to push people out. We want to try to work with people and try to help them as much as we can. In some cases, you just can't. There's not an option. But that's as far as from our perspective, that's how we're approaching it. And note investing is not going away until the banking system itself, everyone shuts down. No one guys gets any more loans or anything. Notes are always going to be there,
Right.
whether it be on property, whether it be on cars, whether it be on mobile homes, whether it be there's always going to be someone's going to pay someone something.
Yeah.
Unless everyone in America becomes millionaires, which they'll never happen.
And even if they do OPM.
Yeah, Jay, to go back to your question
Sorry.
too, talk about where we see everything going in direction for notes in 1 year and 3 years. For us, obviously, we see opportunities coming up where we're going to be able to help a lot of homeowners. Not only that, but for our business, that's why we're so big on LinkedIn, like you mentioned in the beginning, because we found that there's a lot of people there that already have this business mindset, doing business, multifamily, a lot of people with money, right? And what we notice is that a lot of these guys that are doing real estate, not other investors are going to invest, solely on multifamily, right? Solely on one asset. So for us, we're actually creating content both on YouTube and LinkedIn in order to bring awareness to people, really get familiar with note investing. Because our goal is to get people to start investing with us because of the many opportunities that are going to be coming up. I think they're going to be able to really see great returns themselves when they invest with us.
And I can relate on that. I really believe that it's a people business.
Yeah.
And being able to solve the problem. So yes, Shaunn, the calculator will suffice. I will, take into consideration the calculator works. But, with note investing too I think using LinkedIn and YouTube is really more of an educational production, right? Because it sounds so sophisticated, but like you said, it's existed. The banks created it.
It's simple, yeah.
The banks created it. And now, right? And now we have this opportunity as entrepreneurs to get on that, whether from the front side of the business, or if we are needing somebody to come in like yourself and say, hey, we need to exit, let us know how you can help us. And to David's note, what would be your, say, step 1, 2, 3 when you actually deal with somebody that's inquiring about note investing from a business standpoint to work with you?
As far as if they want to get into the note space?
That's right, to invest with you, work with you, and take them through, what you guys are doing. And then, take us through like how you would deal with the customer side of it. if they're needing to solve some problems.
Well, as far as the business side of it, that's why we're doing the videos we're doing. So to educate people,
Right.
to give you that education. We also work with Desi quite a bit. He's actually has a whole note university set up already, where he has a whole curriculum that that he walks people through. We don't want to recreate the wheel because we didn't want to get into a education, a whole like education system. So that's where we leverage our mentor. Like, hey, if you really want to dig into this business and go through like an education, go ahead and check out this link, you know, and and he can teach you from A to Z about this business. Because if you want to start this business,
Mhm.
if you're just a consumer, we've had people come to us like, oh I'm struggling with this, and I'm trying to get out of this mortgage. It's a little more difficult because the bank actually is the one that owns it, and it's not always just about picking up a phone and calling that bank to get that mortgage, because most times banks, they don't want to sell off one or two mortgages. They're selling off a whole tape of mortgages.
Portfolio.
So it's more so maybe helping them, giving them some negotiation points to talk to their bank about and see if they can do anything. Um, if hey, and if they can get us in touch with the asset managers who are in charge, that would be even better, because now we can talk to them about not only maybe buying that note, maybe buying a pool of notes that they have.
Mhm.
So from the consumer side, we don't have in note investing, we don't have a lot of consumer um, interaction. Is more on the business side of things.
Mhm.
And that's, yeah, and I can relate. I totally get it. I saw a couple of videos years back introducing note investing, so it was always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And it was a guy that I'll find it and kind of just share with that with everybody. But it was interesting. What stuck with me is they went to do this case study where his partner was a realtor, and he just happens to have money that he wanted to. So they went and built these relationships through
Okay.
the realtor side, and they basically made those deals. It's almost kind of like a wholesale. So they leave like a 10-20% margins. So it really like stuck with me, and I'm like, okay, I see it from that. Like they simplified that. But like you said, when you're dealing with, banknotes, that's a whole new process, because it's not like they're selling one. It's going to be a portfolio,
Right.
more than that. So
Unless it's a big note.
And that's but you know what, to that point, that's another reason why you probably need to have that financial modeling software, because if you're presenting these deals as far as like co-investment opportunities with other people interested in note investing, you need to be able to show them how this deal cash flows. I mean, doing it on the back of a napkin is not going to be enough of a viable opportunity. You need to be able to show them through a financial modeling software that, hey, you know what, this is how we're buying this. There's say if you're buying a portfolio on single family houses, collectively there's, we'll just say this California, is if you're buying 10 and you say there's, collectively there's $3 million worth of debt here, and we're going to buy it at 2 or 2.5 or something like that, and this is how, and ultimately this is our strategy for turning this over. If they don't perform, we're going to foreclose on the houses, we'll turn them over into rentals. Whatever the situation is, you have to have that kind of built out as a business plan, especially when you want to attract capital. Because effectively, what you with a note investing on a portfolio side, you'd almost be kind of creating like a syndication strategy, I would assume, right? Right, for it to make sense, right? I mean,
you're raising capital.
right, you're raising capital for other people to invest in, but this in these assets, what you have to be able to show how it's going to be profitable for them. It's just not like let's buy these houses for 3 to 5 years and then maybe pull out later or try to sell them off all later. You have to be able to show, like, one, what your action plan is. So if you're buying 10, a portfolio note on 10 houses, then you need to also go from there. You want to make sure that, one, you can foreclose on this house, know what the foreclosure proceedings is in whatever county that you're buying the houses in, foreclose on them, then go and make sure and then go say, hey, you know what, this is our business strategy. We have construction crews or whatever it is, contractors to turn over these houses. Our window to do that, for a stabilization point is, 6 months, a year, whatever it is. But know that you're not going to make any money on this for 6 months to a year.
Right.
Then we're going to reposition these houses. I'm going to actively market them on the market, for sale. This is
Right.
what they're going to be worth. This is what their stabilized value is.
Mhm.
And then, after we, go through the eviction process and the turnover process, where, when we market them for sale, this is how we're going to, essentially have a waterfall agreement as who's going to get this amount of returns.
Oh yeah,
So
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the
Yeah.
same thing for us. We obviously want to, do business with people that understand
Mhm.
note investing. Not somebody just like, hey, here's my money, like
Yeah.
give me some returns. Like they have to really understand what they're doing. Same thing like a multifamily person. If
mhm,
if someone's has $50,000 and they're trying to invest in multifamily, I heard horror stories with people that are not giving any returns. They're freaking out. They don't really understand what's going on.
Mhm.
But in this side, we really want to educate people.
Mhm.
So when they're in a place where like, all right, let me take the next step,
Now
they
understand
fully
what
understand. Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Worst case scenario, the
Mhm.
exit strategy,
Yeah.
we become landlords.
Yeah.
Is that horrible because we bought it at 50 cents on the
Yeah.
dollar? What do you think about that? Well, actually, that's a great deal.
Yeah.
Is this really real?
And the thing is with that, what he's saying is, as far as just educating people,
Mhm.
because you need to know what you're getting into, and as far as to your point, the notes that we bought that we actually own ourselves in our own portfolio, we go through through the due diligence, we go through all the same process. When if we ever present anything to anyone where we're partnering or anything like that, we we have a breakdown. We break down everything to them. This is from start to finish. They actually have an opportunity to go through all the due diligence materials with us if they want to. Some people choose not to because they don't want to deal with that. But we make an opportunity for them. Hey, we'll even do a video walking you through the due diligence documents, and you're allowed to read through those things. So going in, you know everything you're getting involved in.
Yeah.
Like you said, when you're dealing more of a larger fund, um, that's where we're building our track record. We work. I mean, we work with Desi directly. If it's a large pool of notes we contact him because he already has a full team that does due diligence, and we work with them to walk through that due diligence. We also work with him through the whole process just because he has a staff, he has a team,
Mhm.
he's taught us the business, and he's actually our advisor on anything we do. Because if we come across something that we haven't seen before, which is a rare occasion, because in note investing is pretty straightforward, but there is times, just like in any real estate transaction, we even go to him about real estate stuff just because he has 40 years of real estate experience, being a landlord, being a broker, being a lender, being in the note business. So that anyone that works with us, we go through everything with them. They
Yeah.
know going in what they're
Yeah.
getting into.
And that's
So,
one thing that Desi's big on. He said, I really want to make sure everyone understands before they even give me any money.
mhm.
I'd rather reject money all day until they walk through the whole program, just because they're gonna know at the end of the day, okay, cool. Now they're gonna be
Now I
ready.
know what I'm doing.
Now they know what they're doing. Now they know if that perform becomes non-performing, they know exactly what to expect and exactly what Desi's gonna do. So
that's great. I don't know if you guys know who Alvin Hope Johnson is, but if you get a chance, look up his story. He's on John Casman. He was on John Casman's podcast, Target Market Insights, recently, and effectively he runs an apartments and he manages, I think, several hundred apartments in Texas. And he originally he had a mentor scenario like that. His mentor died, and he ultimately became the CEO of a company that was actually larger than what he owns now. And being the fact they didn't have a transition plan in place, they end up having to file Chapter 13 or chapter whichever chapter to for foreclosure proceedings. So just when you're in the business, just know soak up as much make sure
Oh,
that
yeah.
you're in
Oh,
you're
no.
in a place to transition in case there is any unforeseen, and of course
Oh,
nothing that
no.
dramatic, but anything unforeseen where, you may end up having to be more active in the business or, you know.
Yeah, and he knows that knows he makes sure we know what we're doing. And if anything, his daughter's going to take over their business, so we
Okay.
we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
We'll just have to deal with whatever transaction we're working on with
Yeah.
their company. But
Okay.
Yeah.
we're good with that one. So
Okay.
yeah,
Well, I
Yeah.
was also going to
we
say,
don't think your
you know,
father, his son-in-law or daughter are going anywhere anytime soon. We don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon.
Well,
So,
yeah, no, well, just yeah,
but,
just know that when you're, yeah, but that's good.
I was going to say, you guys are doing great, amazing work. And to that note, you guys actually said that what I was about to say, which is stick with what you're doing, sharing the education. I really believe even in the multifamily syndication side of real estate, there's a lot of kinks that you as an investor may not even foresee that no matter what kind of preparation you do, because there's just certain things that we can't control. But going into it, I think the financial education side of it, sharing a video post, being able to cultivate, sort of your tribe that's going to like working with you on the business side of things. And I'm really glad to even hear that, you guys are really into the whole mentorship, like believing that you have a team and having an advisor that goes on I'm really big on that as well. And I'm the type of person, business or not, I really believe that you don't have to know everything. You can put a team together that supports what your vision, your mission, and your goals are. And I think understanding, sort of the emotional quotient that goes into being an entrepreneur, it's a lot of zigzags. It's never straight up. You're not going to be wealthy, over a year. And if you're willing to face that, even in the note investing side or syndication side, or being an active operator, fix and flips, running your rentals, I think you and I both know it's not a straight line.
Right, big time.
It's always going to be that, and that's where cultivating the environment, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's through your educational platform, whether it's in your communities, and working with mentors, I think is really the key to running a really good solid foundation for a business in real estate.
Oh, big time.
And it's very relatable because I'm going through that as well. So I don't know everything in real estate. I don't know everything even in capital, funding. I don't know everything on that, but I know enough to understand that, doing a show like this is really to bring that awareness, share a positive voice. We're in a difficult time with COVID. 34 million people are unemployed or claimed unemployment. Building our empathy radars for, new money coming in. I think it's just looking at California as a whole with politics and certain rules that's, going to be implemented. I think the real estate space, in my opinion, will not be affected that way. I think there's always going to be a demand, a need. There's much more population here compared to, going to South Carolina, somewhere there, where a lot of these investors are going into.
Yeah, big time.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I think, to definitely, conclude on that note with this show, I think whether we're talking about, migration, new money, old money, note investing, I think this is going to be a crazy good time for you guys to really launch and get this underway. I think there's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and going back to your point, Jay, we want to make sure we have mentors for every single thing that we want to grow in. Desi, we have him as a note investor, real estate investor. I have a mentor that focuses on YouTube, and YouTube, that's all he does. So I go to him on things that I'm doing. He gives me constant feedback. He's like, you did a great job, and there's that but then he slams me. We have a spiritual mentor, pastors. Then we have a leadership mentor that's one of the what do you call it, directors for IT in Walmart. And when we came to him, I was like, hey, I want to more mentorship on leadership, time management. But He's like, let's focus on your home first. And I'm like, what do you mean? Let's focus on your family. Let's focus on things that really matter, and then just focus on that, grow that, and then the rest shall follow. And I'm like, oh, okay, okay.
The ecosystem.
Hmm.
And with the mentorship and having the best advice at hand, I think really working on ourselves is really key.
Big time.
Even step into in anything, investing, business, etc. So I think having you guys at getting to the points, I know we made a lot of good points, and some of them I'll probably most likely find a way to kind of really highlight on this video. And to those that's tuning in and viewing this, and they're wondering, why is California, sounding like it's crazy? Yes, it's crazy, but we're loving it here. We have the beautiful sunshine. We've got, a lot of amenities being in this state. But if you are interested to connect with us, we're all actively engaging on LinkedIn. And Shaunn and William, share with everyone where they can connect with you as well, aside from LinkedIn.
Yeah, aside from LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. Follow us at Cash Flow Generation. We're launching our podcast in about 2 weeks. It's going to be called Cash Flow Generation as well. So you could, contact us there. You could contact us, or you could go to our website, swcashflowgen.com. And then obviously LinkedIn is a place where we connect a whole lot, right? Very active on LinkedIn, so connect with us there.
Awesome. Amazing. David, this was a great episode. I mean, we could have continued on. There's just so much to cover. But, because the show is let's get to the point, we'll definitely get a lot of points.
That's a lot of points, yeah.
You've got California politics. You've got Amazon on there. You've got note investing.
Yeah.
You've got 2 amazing guests. What else can we ask for? We're blessed. We're grateful. So, David, any last words?
No, thank you guys for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you,
David.
for having
Thank you,
us.
Jay.
We'll see you soon.